Hi everybody, and welcome to the Wild Ginger Running YouTube channel live broadcast. Tonight, delighted to be here with Jasmin Paris. Hi Jasmin.
Hello. Hello.
She's fresh from her second Barkley Marathons, so for many of you, Jasmin will need absolutely no introduction whatsoever, but just in case, this year Jasmin got to the 9th book on the 4th lap out of the 5 in the Barkleys. It's the furthest for a woman so far, and if you roll back the clock to 2019, Jasmin created the record outright for the Spine race. That's 268 miles along the Pennine Way in winter. She's also won countless races, including the Dragon's Back, many classic fell races, and at one point she held the women's Bob Graham record and the overall Ramsey round record. So you could say that Jasmin's sort of an all-right runner. Well, I didn't want to make you blush too much. So welcome, Jasmin. It's fantastic of you to give up your time to chat to us this evening. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's been straight back into kind of, full-time work. So I'm on clinics this week, so it's always just a bit of a juggle of trying to get home, get the kids fed and things. But yeah, we managed it. I'm here chatting to you, so that's good.
Fantastic. Yeah, and hopefully the kids will go to bed with no problems, and hopefully if we hear any screaming, it'll be Finley from next door as well. So both of us there escaping the kids tonight. Congratulations on your Barkleys experience, your second time round. First of all, just in case somebody doesn't know what the Barkleys is, can we just recap on what is the Barkley Marathons in a nutshell?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a unique challenge. I struggle to even think of it as a race, to be honest. I think it's more of a challenge, and it's kind of the brainchild, I guess, of the guy called Gary Cantrell, or known as Laz, and he the race is based on this the escape of James Earl Ray from the prison there, and it's based in Frozen Head State Park in Tennessee, and I think this prisoner escaped and was found, I think, a long time later, something like 2 or 3 days later, and he'd only managed to get a few miles from the prison. And on that basis, I think Laz, there was a kind of discussion amongst people, including Laz, of how far they could get in the same sort of time, and they betted that that you could do 100 miles in that time. So I think that was kind of roughly, that's at least the legend of kind of the idea of the race was based on. So it's probably roughly 100 miles, although nobody really knows. So each loop is probably about 20 miles long, and with quite a lot of ascent, more ascent than any other ultra race of that distance, really. So maybe about 4,000 meters per loop, but nobody really knows, because you're not allowed to take any sort of GPS or like any sort of device like that, any watch, so you can't really record it. So you don't really know, but that's roughly probably what it is. And you have 60 hours. Sorry, you've got 60 hours to do it, so roughly 12 hours per loop. And if you finish 3 loops in 40 hours, it's a fun run. And but yeah, you need to do each loop in the 12 hours or consecutive loops, and like you have to have done 2 loops in 24 hours, 3 loops in 36 hours to go out for the next one. And you have to find these books as you go along and pull out pages, and that's kind of your checkpoint. You're assigned a page at the start of each loop, a page number, and then you have to pull out those pages to show that you've been to the books as you go along. And there's kind of navigation involved. A lot of it's off trail. It's very steep, and the terrain's pretty gnarly as you go.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, it sounds fun. And it's really interesting that I've listened to several podcasts that you've done since you've come back, and in all of them you say that you didn't really fancy doing the Barkleys a few years back. And it was the same with your Spine race as well. It seems that you didn't kind of fancy it, and then you changed your mind. Why didn't you fancy both of those types of races in the first place, and what does make you change your mind about these things? Because it says in your blog now that you're in the grip of the Barkley obsession now.
Yeah, I think both the races have this kind of common theme in that they, like, just on first glance it would look like it can't be very much fun to do them. They both look like they involve quite a lot of suffering and quite a lot of sort of having to put yourself kind of dig pretty deep to finish it, or to like, I guess in the case of the Spine, really to finish it fast, I guess. So I think with the Spine originally I sort of thought It sounds pretty miserable in the middle of winter in the dark, and going all that way on your own in snow and slush and wind and rain. But the thing that kind of in the end drew me to it was this kind of niggling sort of feeling of, could you do it? Like, how well could you do it? Especially watching it each year and following the dots, so you get kind of, it's a bit like watching the London Marathon. I've never done that, but every time I watch it, I sort of get like, all kind of, it kind of it sort of draws you in, doesn't it? And has you wondering how well you could do it and what it must be like to be in that atmosphere. So it's a bit like that for the spine, and I think every year that feeling grew a little bit. And then at some point I was like, I wonder, how well I could do, and could you really finish it? So that, I think for the spine it was like that. And then the other things for the spine were, it was in the sort of, when I signed up for it, it was when my daughter was quite small and I was not getting much sleep, and I needed a motivation to train over the winter, and that's kind of what the spine did. So I guess for Barkley it was a similar sort of thing. Like, I heard about it after, I think I got interviewed a lot after the spine, and people asked me whether I'd want to run the Barkley Marathons at some point, because I think Laz had maybe been interviewed at some point and someone had asked him, and he'd expressed an interest in me running it or seeing how well I could do. So I think that the idea was probably planted in my head at that point, but it still took a while for me to want to do it. I actually had my son in the intervening period, and then again it was like I was sort of looking for something like a big challenge to kind of come back to, and then suddenly Barkley was like, suddenly I wanted to do it. So I just had to wait for that moment. I guess I'd known for a couple of years that probably would happen, but I just needed it needed to be the right time, because I think it's a challenge that you really need to want to do, because it's so, I think the main challenge in Barkley is like is it's almost yourself, your own kind of mental barriers, and if you can kind of work through those and keep going when it gets really hard, that's what probably is the key to a successful finisher. So I think to do that you need to really want it. You need to be doing it for you, and not for like social media recognition, and not for money, and not for sponsorship or anything like that. You need to just be doing it to prove it to yourself, if you see what I mean.
Like the fire needs to burn from within first. Yeah, I get you. So we've got loads of people watching live, and we've got loads of questions as well from my patrons. So I'll just give you an idea of who's watching live. Just do a few shout outs so that we can see who's here. We've got Andrea, we've got Tadeusz, Andrew, Severine, Phil, and I don't know how to pronounce this name, Noad. So the first question I got from one of my patrons is about your training. So you mentioned the reason behind it was you really the fire needs to burn within. You had your second child, you need to get back into things. But what sort of hill training do you do for the Barkleys? Because of that elevation is so massive, and that's from David Grimsell.
So I'm now coached by Damien Hall, and I started being coached by Damien before the spine. So I guess we worked through a kind of plan together, and basically my training was kind of standard, or working up until about 2 months beforehand, and then the kind of ascent really cranked up in terms of how much I was doing. But still, the most ascent I did in a kind of single run was about just under 4,000 meters, somewhere around there this time. So it wasn't crazy amounts, but then they would be like doubled up days or tripled days of doing kind of big ascents. But I think, if you have a kind of all round solid base to work on, and then you kind of get the bigger days out in the hills with more ascent, and that's kind of a really good starting point. And I also do kind of strength work as well. I think that helps as well with lots of climbing. So it was a combination of those things. But my training this year wasn't as ideal as I'd have wanted it to be, because I had some kind of training issues, like had some chronic fatigue in the autumn, and then I got injured as well. So I think we did what we could, and that's roughly what it looked like in terms of training. Quite easy ones, like we don't, probably kind of the hard sessions would be like one hard session during the week and then a hard session at the weekend, combined with a long, as part of a longer run, and then another longer run that was easy would be kind of a typical week.
Yeah. And how do you fit that all in? Because you've got your 2 kids now, and we've got Diane here on the live as well. She says, "Yay, Jasmin Paris, legend. I'm also a mum of 2 small children, and running is my joy and my free time to myself." So it sounds like she's in similar circumstances there. How do you fit it in? I've heard on other podcasts that you can survive on 6 hours sleep a night. I would personally be dead on that. But yeah, how does it work for you and your family?
So I think so basically, yeah, what I've always done is I've always trained in the early morning, so like 5-ish, sort of getting up, and I guess I've never really had a problem. I've never needed that much sleep. But the interesting thing was this autumn when I felt really tired, and I don't know whether it was just having 2 small children, working full time, coming off the back of the UTMB, where I think I was ill, to be honest, because I had some sort of gut problem. And I still sort of ran quite a long way there, given that I was like that. I don't know, whether it was some sort of chronic fatigue. And then I really struggled to train on that amount of sleep. So I just honestly had to say I wasn't going to do as much strength training, and I wasn't going to do as much running, and I just slept instead. But for me, like for a professional athlete that doesn't do anything except for, that runs and doesn't have a full-time job, I guess it would be easier to kind of do both. But I had to just then kind of prioritize sleep over training a bit. So in general, my answer to the question would be that I train early in the morning, but I definitely experienced that if that's not possible, then I needed to prioritize sleep a bit, and then unfortunately the training does have to take a back seat a little bit.
Take a hit, yeah. Do you find that easy to listen to your body in that way? Have you always been quite good at that? Yeah, I found it really difficult having the flu this month. Like, it's only a month, and I'm like, oh my god, I haven't run since the 12th of March. Oh my goodness. Like, I can't imagine how hard that would be for you, because you're doing even more.
Yeah, I think that, to be honest, I think that's how I knew that I really needed to take a break, because I stopped feeling like I really wanted to go out, and that's how I guess I knew that I really needed to have a rest, because I started wanting to stay in bed rather than run. So that's kind of the answer. But once the kind of new year came, I felt like really keen to train again. So so then we managed to get some good training in time.
Awesome. And you also had a bit of a knee injury, didn't you? A setback. Colin has been concerned about this. Colin Bergstrand, he says, can you ask Jasmin what is the situation with her knee injury? I have read that it's quite serious. Is she doing anything specifically to manage it in short or medium term? Is it likely to hamper her training and racing? So he's very concerned about you. Sending you his best wishes.
That's very kind. So interestingly, so my knee injury is like a chronic thing. When I was actually 17, I fell off a horse, my horse actually. So I have to give her the blame. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, which is it's just the kind of classic injury in footballers and skiers. So it's completely torn. But just for various reasons, I didn't kind of get diagnosed till about like several months later, by which time I was using the knee normally. So I never had surgery on it. So it's not. I just don't have a cruciate ligament in my left knee. So all the running I've done has been without it. So I guess what's just happened is there's been like some meniscal damage, and so that's kind of what happened. So there's some chronic changes in the knee with some meniscal damage. So I wasn't necessarily told that I was going to be making it worse by running. It was more didn't seem to be kind of anything specific that they could do. So I just kind of cracked on and did what I could, and then it seems to have got better since Barkley, which is quite bizarre. But yeah, I'm happy with that. That's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, oh good. I'm glad it's a bit better as well. That's fantastic news. On to the actual Barkley. I know that you're not allowed to tell us certain things, so don't mention anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, but are you able to say what it's like at the campsite, like when you arrive, like what's the atmosphere like? How do you feel when you get there? Is there kind of a buzz? This year I think this year was a bit different than last year, because it still had the same kind of excitement. There's definitely a buzz there when you arrive. I think last year there was more fear, because you didn't know what to expect. So this time there was definitely this kind of this kind of anticipation. There was a feeling of anticipation, because you're going to be challenged and it's going to be really hard and things. But at the same time,
there wasn't the kind of the dread of the unknown, because I knew what I was doing a bit more this time. And this time there was also the kind of joy of, well, just seeing people that you'd seen the year before. And so they couldn't kind of talk about this Barkley family. So there are a crew of people that kind of, I guess, probably end up there every year, kind of regulars. And it was nice to those people that I'd sort of made friends with, I guess, last year. And the other thing was that I sorry, somebody's looking out the window. The other thing was that what I was going to say. Sorry, so it was nice to see everybody. If I remember what I was going to say, I'll add it in the middle.
Yeah, because there must be the same people coming back, and there's that guy that comments, doesn't he, on Twitter, and everybody, and he calls everybody a funny name. Did he give you a funny name? It was you were called Small European Woman or something like that, weren't you? That's what he called you.
Yeah. So
yeah, a good nickname. And then so obviously then you get the conch blown, and then you have to wait an hour, and then Laz lights his cigarette, and that's the start of the race, which is really unconventional, obviously. What's it like on that yellow gate, just like before everyone goes? Is there like last minute panic? Are people running off to get things? How did you feel there?
So I mean, I think because this year it was blown at like 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. I think. So actually it was like a really civilized time, because by then I think most people were already awake and had breakfast. So then you have an hour essentially to sort yourself, to just get your kit on and that sort of thing. I think if it was blown in the middle of the night, it'd probably be a bit more chaotic, because you'd be trying to do things in the dark and try and eat and everything else. So it was a bit calmer this year. But yeah, so I mean, there's like a definite sense of anticipation. You have to go and get your watches after that as well. So because they're all set to the time of the start as a 00. So there's that kind of, that's really all you have to do, and then line up at the yellow gate, and set off. No, the start is really kind of, everybody's together for a short period on the race, but that's kind of quite atypical for the rest of the race. You're either on your own or in a quite small group, so the start is definitely the most social bit.
yeah, or tripping over people. We'll come to that in a minute. Tripping over people sleeping in the trail. So we've got a question about the weather from Tadeusz. He says, what difference did the weather make each time that Jasmin's done the Barkley? How does she prepare for possible rapid changes in temperature and rain? Because it's pretty intense weather around there, isn't it? It can be boiling hot and then freezing cold, like from lap to lap and day to night, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this year the weather was absolutely fantastic. It was like it was as good as it could possibly have been, in the sense that it was pretty cold, like in the night it was definitely in the minuses. So it was really cold in the night, and the ground was frozen, and the water that they'd put out for us, the water that are kind of, there's a couple of places, there's some water on the course anyway, and that was frozen. So I think most people probably just drank as I did, drank from the streams as well. But so it was super cold, but it meant that the ground was frozen, and so you weren't kind of sliding as much on the steep ups and downs. And also it just meant, because it was so clear, there was no fog, and you sort of knew what to expect. Like, it's okay to be prepared for cold. It's much easier to be cold and dry than it is to be cold and wet, because then you need to carry more kit, and also it's much easier to get like really cold if you're wet as well, isn't it? So yeah, it was just really good weather. I think one of the problems of Barkley is often that the weather is quite changeable, so people don't really know how to pack. Last year the weather was pretty warm to hot for the first day, and then in the evening it rained, and it rained all night, and it was really cold, and a lot of people kind of got hypothermic, I think, that first night. Whereas I had quite a lot of kit with me, including a really good waterproof and things, and I was okay, but I wasn't like hot, and I had pretty much everything on, I think. So definitely the weather would make a big difference there. And if fog, like, unless you know it, like the back of your hand, and even then I think you could still get lost in the fog. So I think fog would be a bit of a killer on Barkley. So I'm really hoping if I go back that in the fog.
Yeah, I know. It's just like you'll just have to keep going back year on year, because you need all the stars to align, don't you? You need to be okay. You need to do really good nav, eat really good food, and the weather's got to be good. It's just all these things. It makes it a real challenge. And everyone's really interested in the navigation as well. John Airy says, navigation in the dark, how do you manage it? And I've heard on other podcasts that you said it's not so much even about navigation, but just like finding little features like through in the dark, and that can be really hard if you've seen certain features in the day and then you're like, oh, everything looks different now in the dark. I suppose going back there a few times, does it make it easier, the navigation? How do you manage it in the dark? Like, if you're allowed to say, like, don't say anything you're not allowed to say, obviously.
I mean, I think it's no secret that, like, most people that haven't been before, so like officially known as Barkley virgins, try to team up with someone that has been before, and like a Barkley veteran, because it gives you a much greater chance of getting further in the race. He's kind of Damien this year ran with John Kelly and managed to get onto Loop 5. And I think that he would be the first to admit that was like a huge help to be with somebody that knew his way around so well. Yeah. So it's undoubtedly a big advantage. But then again, like look at, I think, Aurelian, if that's how you pronounce it. I think he ran pretty much from the start on his own the first time at Barkley, and he finished, which was incredible. So like clearly it can be done. So that would be so there's a combination of navigation, like old style, like making sure you're going down the right side of the hill with on a compass bearing, but also kind of looking for clues around you, and recognizing things that you've seen before.
Yeah, I bet it helps being a fell runner and being like okay in the mountains. You wouldn't want to just come from doing a fast marathon.
I think that definitely is the case, but that's not just from the point of view of the nav. It's like massively also the terrain. Like as a fell runner, you're kind of used to sliding down things on your bottom and crossing stuff and like wading through streams and stuff like that. So if you weren't comfortable doing all that stuff, then I don't think you'd get very far.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you'd want to definitely have some experience running around forests and orienteering and that kind of thing, wouldn't you? So that's the nav. And then I was quite intrigued by something in your blog that you wrote about what you ate. You said you had Sonic TM potato tots. Is that just a brand, or was that somebody who made them called Sonic?
It was just like the local fast food place. And I think that was the place that like all the crew were going out to for like their own food in between loops. But also to like, I think they brought back like, I guess the equivalent of their like French fries. There's these like tater tots, and Damien had these like little cinnamon buns from that place, like the tiny little ones. So that sort of thing. So it was just like the local fish and chips, but American style. So yeah, that's what it was.
Oh, okay. And what was the best thing that you ate during the Barkley Marathons, would you say?
I'm wondering if it was that or it probably might have just been, it's hard to say, because I think once you've been running for a bit, it's not that enjoyable eating anything really. And I would say the porridge or pasta, but Conrad didn't manage to burn the porridge and pasta. So later on I got one that was definitely not burnt, and that was very nice pasta. Had chocolate oat milk and the Sonic tater tots. I think I ate all of those things before I went out for the fourth loop, so I was definitely well fueled for that one, so that was pretty good.
Yeah, awesome. And how important is that support on the Barkleys? Was it just Conrad doing that? Because he's got his work cut out, hasn't he, to wake up every so often and go, oh, is she here? What does she want?
Yeah, so you actually only allowed one crew member.
Oh, okay.
Anyway. There's lots of people around there to help anyway, because most, if you think about it, the crew members are there all that time, and the amount of time they get to see their person for is about 10 minutes in every 12 hours or something, so it's not very, most of the time they're waiting. So if there's lots of other people around, like when you come in, there's lots of people stood around like ready to help in any way they can. I think especially once you've gone through the first lap where people might be closer together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was just Conrad, and I think I guess they go up to during the day they can go up to there's only one point on the course that they can see you, which is by the fire tower at the top of Raptor. So I think the crew members all go up there to see people through when they can during the day, but they're not allowed to go up during the night because the park rules don't allow that.
Yeah. Okay. So it can be they need to take a pack of cards or something and amuse themselves for a bit. um, and then on to the foot care. Got a question from Melissa Mason. She says, yes, super excited for this one. She's also, she's a friend of mine actually. She's got a young kid as well. So she's super inspired by your progress in everything. She said, could you please ask Jasmin about her foot care for such an intense race? Like how many pairs of shoes and socks did she use? Does she have to use any barrier cream or anything like that to prevent blisters? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about this. It's like sound of children.
Oh, don't worry at all. I can hear Finley screaming next door, so I think it's just real life, isn't it? Coughing and children.
But I'm really looking. I've just not had very many problems with my feet on long distance races, and this was the same. I think I changed my socks once on this race. I wore the same pair of shoes the whole time. I didn't get any blisters. What I did get which is slightly weird, is that the kind of the ends of my toes, well, initially they were numb because they were cold, and I definitely at some point Conrad asked me, how are your feet, and I said, oh, they're totally fine. And then when I went out for the next lap, at some point they started to defrost and they felt like pretty sore. But they still have this kind of residual slight numbness at the end of the toes, which I think is probably just because of getting bashed on the end of my shoes quite a lot repeatedly for like 52 hours. And it's definitely getting better, so I'm assuming it's just a temporary thing. And I'm guessing it's something to do with the nerves being slightly irritated or something. So that's the only thing that's odd with my toes, but I didn't get any blisters, which was quite incredible. And to be honest, on the spine I only actually had one blister on each foot, and it was just between the big toe and the next toe, and it's because some grit had gotten to both sides. But I'm just lucky that I didn't get like ones that people get on the heels and stuff, just maybe from doing lots of hiking around when I was a kid, both barefoot and then later in mountains, I don't know. But for whatever reason I just don't really have problems with blisters much.
That's brilliant. Oh, I'm very happy for you. I chatted to Sabrina Vergi about that because I photographed her feet after the Pennine Way record that she made. And yeah, she said she hardly gets blisters too. So I'm very jealous because I get blisters a lot. I need to ask you about your motivation lap after lap now. We've got a question from David Grimsell. He says, how do you stay motivated to keep going that lap after lap when it's so cold and it's so hard? And also, how do you stay awake as well? How do you keep your eyes open?
So I think to answer the first bit, the motivation thing I think is easier to answer, because I guess I just wanted it. I want it badly enough. I guess the point that would be potentially challenging would be, like, obviously you go back each time you go through camp, so unlike other races where it's like linear and you've got a defined end point that you're aiming for, that's I think easier mentally, whereas when you keep going through the same point and then you have to head out again, knowing, for example, there's parts of the course that are very difficult, knowing that you're going to have to go back and do that bit again, that's mentally quite hard. But I didn't actually really struggle with that. Like, I guess once I got into the camp, it was maybe because the support there is so fantastic and you kind of get this big adrenaline rush when you're in the camp, that I find getting back out on the loop was like, there was a real rush to get out and like a real kind of buzz, and I didn't find that difficult. And once I was out, it was like there was just a job to be done. The job was to get to the end of the loop, and so I didn't, like, it's not like I really questioned going out on loop 4. Like, I just wanted to get out on loop 4, even though, like, statistically speaking, it was very unlikely I was going to get back in time, but I still just wanted to do as much as I could. So from my point of view, that was less difficult to answer in terms of motivation, because I kind of really wanted it. You know, you're right, it is really hard at times. It gets really hard. But I think guess that's what it comes back to, the sort of what it takes to want to finish that race, I guess, is to really want it. And then come back to the sleeping thing. I think that's much harder. Like, I definitely struggled this year, and I think everybody struggled a bit, but it's difficult, because even on the spy night and the second night I slept, and it wasn't like super long sleep, it was like 2 hours or something, but that was enough to feel totally recovered. But I think if I'm ever going to finish Barkley, I'm not sure that I'm ever going to be able to sleep, because the time is so short. I guess it's a kind of toss up between, if you sleep for 5-10 minutes, maybe you'd be that much faster. In fact, you probably would, because I spent quite a lot of time on loop 4 falling asleep. So I don't know, maybe there would be a slightly better strategy. But in answer to the question, I didn't get it completely right, because I definitely was falling asleep a bit. I tried to not allow myself to be too warm and comfortable. Like, I didn't put my coat on till while I was falling asleep. I mean, I tried to then, I had some caffeine gum and I had some caffeine gels, so using those, and and then just like, I think I washed my face in cold water at some point to kind of try and wake myself up a bit. But it's pretty difficult. And during other races, I've done the PTL and things, and remember like setting an alarm and sleeping for 5 minutes and then getting up. But at Barkley, you have no watch to wake yourself up. Damien and John, the other people talked about trying to set an alarm on their watches, but you've never had this watch before. And I didn't see any sort of way of setting an alarm, but also, like, I was terrified that I was going to change the setting or the screen and not be able to see what the time was, type thing, anymore. So I didn't try and do that. I think John Kelly's approach was to lie down on the book and wait, and hope that then he knew that the next person that came along would wake him up.
Yes.
But like for loop 4, I was back of the course. There was nobody else behind me, so I couldn't rely on that at all. So yeah. So that's a really long.
You kind of need to take, like, could you take it like one of those old-fashioned alarm clocks with you? Like with the little ding-a-ding-a-ding-a-ding thing. Would that be allowed?
I don't know. Like, see, I mean, I thought about this beforehand. My guess is no. Like, I don't think that would be in the spirit of it. Just that's part of Barkley. That's part of the challenge of it, is that people fall asleep and don't wake up. So I don't think it would be in the spirit of it.
No, we're vetoing the alarm clock. No alarm clock allowed. And talking of falling asleep, Colin has another question. He says, can you please ask Jasmin what state Damien was in when she met him on his final lap? I understand that she found the book that Damien couldn't, and that he was suffering quite badly from sleep deprivation. So that was a funny story, isn't it? The way that you met Damien on the floor.
Down to the finish. And just going over the last kind of little bit of ridge, and then I saw this person lying across the path. But I'd seen so many hallucinations by that point that I assumed it was just another one of those. But then it stayed there as I got closer, and then I realised it was Damien. And like, it's weird, because at that point you see, it's like the whole kind of, it's just so surreal by that point in the race, when you're that sleep deprived and tired. And I think I was a bit dehydrated actually as I finished as well, because I had not taken on water at the last point. There was a kind of couple of reasons, but I remember thinking, so it was just like a really sort of surreal feeling, and thinking, should I leave him sleeping here, but then this kind of, this into my consciousness, this realization that he probably didn't want to be sleeping in the forest for whatever reason. And then I woke him up, and at which point he said, looking very kind of concerned, "Are you all right?" Which I remember thinking was slightly ironic, given that it was him that was lying on the floor. And then we proceeded to have a really, really odd conversation. The sort of conversation that you could not possibly have unless you were two people that had not slept for 2.5 days and spent the whole time running up and down the hills in a forest. He hadn't been able to find that book. But to be fair to him, coming from the other side, it's harder in a way. It's a mistake that other people have made, and I think it's not necessarily even just down to, I'm sure the sleep deprivation probably played a role, but it's not entirely straightforward. And it's not like being good at navigation in that situation would help you that much. Being good at remembering where you'd been previously and the way that you'd gone previously would help. But in terms of having the map with you, the map wouldn't help at that point. Do you see what I mean?
So was he going the other way to you then?
Yeah,
at that point. Yeah. So from his angle, it was harder to get. Oh, I see. I just think it was really funny the way that he then told you that he'd picked up some leaves or something from that area to prove he'd been there, and then he said, "I've left some crumbs by the book so that Laz will know I've been there. Some crumbs of biscuit." I was like, that's so Damien. Like, he's had a cup of tea and a biscuit, fallen asleep. It was just so funny. If you haven't read Jasmin's blog on this, then definitely do. I'll link to it in the film description below, but it's a very funny conversation. And you yourself, you had some hallucinations and kind of tired conversations with, like you said, like old friends and family kept popping up. And I just wondered, I don't think anybody else has asked you this question, but you're bilingual in Czech as well, and I just wondered, were you talking to these people in Czech or English? Like, what does it come to you, like when you're really sleep deprived, do you suddenly switch language? How does that work for you?
I think my mum was there at some point, so I definitely think I talked to her in Czech, because that's the way we always talk to each other. She talks to me, I always talk to her in Czech. I think most of the other people, like Conrad was there at some point, my brother was there. I think the whole family was I was like back to being a child at one point as well. So I think most of the other conversations were in English. But yeah, there was a bit of Czech there as well.
Yeah, that's amazing that your brain can just do, even though it's really sleep deprived, it's still completely bilingual. I think it's fascinating. I'd love to be bilingual, it'd be amazing. Yeah, so that's the state of Damien. So yeah, I was just wondering also if you're thinking of going back. I don't know if you're allowed to say this kind of thing, but if you are thinking of going back, is it slightly worrying for everybody now that 3 people have finished that year? Surely Laz is going to make it even harder for 2024 if the race is on again.
Yeah, I think that's definite. I would say that it's very likely he'll make it a bit harder. How much harder he'll make it, I don't know. I mean, I think Laz is he's a very smart guy. Like he knows that, he must know that the weather conditions this year would have played a significant role in 3 people finishing. So, and I guess just based on historically, it's not that likely that you'll get another year that's as good as it was this year. I still think he'll make it a bit harder, but I'm hoping he doesn't make it so much harder that, yeah, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, we don't want a spate of 5 years not finishing, so no finishes again. I was just saying earlier how much I really like reading all your blog posts about all your races and all your adventures that you do, and I was just wondering if you would ever consider writing a book about your running adventures, because I just personally think it would be really fascinating to read it, and I think a lot of other, especially young female athletes, would be really inspired by that.
I would. I definitely think I've thought about writing a book in the past, and I think I probably will at some point. At the moment, I feel like there's still kind of unfinished business, both in terms of, well, there's Barkley, and who knows if I will finish that and what will be the final result of that. But I feel like there's more to still, there's more story still to come in terms of that chapter, and potentially something else. I think what will probably happen is that there'll be some catalyst that triggers me to write it, be it something like whatever happens at Barkley or another race, and I suddenly triggered to write it, because I definitely thought about it after the spine, but it just felt too early. So at some point I'll write a book.
Yeah. You could always write a trilogy. Part 1, part 2, part 3.
How much time?
Pamphlets, maybe pamphlets. But that's fantastic. Like, it's just so great the way you got so far on the Barkleys. It's really, really inspiring. Although I do think the biggest success was your mum doing that potty training with your youngest while you and Conrad were away.
Yeah, that was pretty fantastic, actually. Yeah, pretty fantastic. I think quite a lot of Peppa Pig was used. Peppa Pig watching was used as kind of as rewards. But we weaned off that pretty quickly when we got back. So yeah, no, it's fantastic. It was really good. And it was quite good. It was quite kind of cheering to have that update from home as well, about about what had been achieved in the last 12 hours at home in terms of the potty training. So that was good.
Yeah, like every loop a new success. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really great that your mum and dad are there to look after the children as well. We've got just a few more questions, but I really want to get on to the fact that you're a co-founder of the Green Runners. I don't know how many people know about that. We've had a few people in the live chat saying they want to hear about that. Can you tell us a bit more about what the Green Runners is and whether people might like to join it?
Yeah, I mean I would love to have a brief chat. I'm never that good explaining this, but I'm one of the co-founders, but really now there's a fantastic group of people that are kind of running with this, and I would say that my role is very peripheral, especially now. But it was kind of put together. The idea is to, I guess, help. It's a community for runners that care about the planet and that want to reduce their footprint, I guess, in terms of damage to the planet through both within their running and also just their kind of everyday life. And the aim is, the idea of this is built around 4 pillars, and they are how you move, how you speak out, how you kit up, and how you fuel. So very briefly, how you move for most runners, that will be kind of travel to races and events that they do. So thinking about travelling maybe within the UK, if you're travelling within the UK, trying to use public transport or car sharing, for example. If you're travelling abroad and going by land or sea rather than flying, if possible, for example. So like last year, I travelled to UTMB by train rather than flying. So that's kind of the how you move. How you kit up would be just trying to use the kit that you have, because that's the most sustainable kit. Trying to swap kit or repair it, reuse it, rather than buying new kit. And when you buy new kit, to kind of do it really thoughtfully, and buying kit that's going to last, maybe the kit that can be repaired, and that sort of thing. Then in terms of how you fuel, generally that would be to consider sort of eating less meat, especially red meat and beef and lamb, and eating less dairy, really, because we know that these kind of have the biggest carbon footprint. But also as runners, thinking about how you fuel during the race, like are you're running, have you got gel wrappers that can't be recycled, that sort of thing, and could that be kind of switched out? And then how you speak out, and that's got to be the most important one. So so I guess I'm trying to speak out a little bit here, but this would be, this might be talking to your colleagues about why you're what you're doing with the Green Runners, or why you choosing to eat less meat than you used to do, or why you're cycling to work. Or it might be like contacting your local race organizer and asking if they can put the start time of the race to fit with a train, with a train arriving at the station, so that you can actually get to the race by public transport rather than having to drive. So those would be kind of things, speaking out, and obviously social media, because that's a fantastic way of kind of speaking out. And then attending, climate protests and taking part in, for example, the climate relay, which the Green Runners were involved in last year. So all these sorts of things. But if you're interested in joining the Green Runners, then all you have to do, the main thing is you need to make a pledge, and you need to kind of take action based on that pledge. So it might just be, as I say, something as simple as I'm going to cycle to work instead of driving, or something, or I'm going to, or running wise, I'm going to try and take public transport to the races around me, or I'm going to eat less dairy or something like that. So you kind of make your pledge. You can have a look at the pledges that I made, but as I say, you have to sort of explain them a little bit already. And then you send that to us, and there's like a really small fee, I think £2.50, and you become a member of the Green Runners community. And the whole point is that none of us are perfect. In fact, I'm very much not perfect at all, and very far from it. But the idea is that you start trying to make changes to get better. And that's like, if we can inspire lots of people to start thinking about their footprint as runners, and their carbon footprint, and just their impact upon the planet, then I think we'll make a really positive difference overall.
Yeah, like if we just all do a few more little things, I'm sure as runners we're all trying to do our best at the moment anyway, but there's some great ideas on the Green Runners website, and I'll link to it in the film description below as well, because even if you don't sign up, if you just do some of the actions, that's even better than signing up, isn't it?
Yeah, I would stress really, I feel really passionately about that, is that it doesn't, it's great to be part of the community because you get this sense of kind of camaraderie, and you can spot each other at races if you've got like if you've sewn on the green runner's badge, but that's not that important. Like the real important thing is the action. So if we can inspire more people to take action, and there's loads of good ideas, and there's like links to ideas of how you repair your shoes and things like that. So whether or not you want to call yourself a green runner specifically as a member, if you start taking the action, then that will be our job done. That's what we want,
yes.
to inspire change.
Well, I'm very inspired by that. Thank you very much for that. I shall now be a ginger green runner. And we just got a couple more questions if you've got time, Jasmin.
Yeah.
So Arlene Matelock wants to know if you will apply for the Hard Rock 100 next year. And she wants to know, if you did it, what kind of training would you need to do for that higher elevation? I'm thinking more of the same. 10,000. Kind of like UTMB, isn't it? 10,000 meters of ascent in Colorado and at altitude.
I'd love to do Hard Rock, and actually that's something that I didn't apply for Hard Rock because I didn't want to fly to the US twice in 1 year this year. So I think basically what's going to happen is that at some point I'm just going to switch between doing like the Barkley thing and the Hard Rock thing. And part of me is thinking that Hard Rock is somewhere I would like to go on a family holiday, and this is answering the altitude question as well. So I think we would go for try to go for a month with the kids and go hiking at altitude, and then I'd run the race type thing. That's my plan. So for that reason, it makes sense to leave it a couple of years, because my son is still only 2.5. So to do a little bit more walking, he's pretty good at walker already, but to do a little bit more, I think it'd be better if he was a bit older, and then we could kind of at least get out for some more kind of decent family walks. So I think in a couple of years' time plus, I'll apply for Hard Rock. And hopefully it won't matter that I'll be a bit older, because like long distance runners, doesn't matter as much. I mean, just look at there's lots of brilliant older long distance runners, so I hope that I've got a few years.
Oh yeah, at least 20 years I would have thought. Yeah, hey,
would be in Wendy Dodds is a great inspiration for the trail running community. So.
Yeah, she is amazing, isn't she? She's brilliant. And so your next race that you have coming up is Tour de Géant, is that right?
Yeah.
And you like a journey race, don't you? Have you got any other journey races that are on your bucket list?
I'm doing a race in the summer actually as well. Partly as training for Tour de Géant, partly because we're going to be in the Alps at that point, and it's going to be very close. Which is a race around the Matterhorn, which is it's kind of like a tour of the Matterhorn, and the course looks really good.
Cool.
I'm doing that, and I think it's quite technical as well, so I'm looking forward to that. In terms of other journey races, I guess just within the UK there's like other races that I've thought of doing, but I kind of like the idea of doing some of the kind of long distance trails as journeys, not necessarily races. There's like some of the long distance trails in the States, for example, as well. So there's quite a few different things but the next thing would be the Tour de Géant.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, like stuff like the Pacific Coast Trail and like the Appalachian Trail, they all look amazing, don't they? But that's
the time for them, isn't it? Because
need months and months.
Well, yeah, and while your kids are small, I sort of feel like I might end up just doing that once that I'm older and nobody really minds where I am anymore.
Yeah.
Is interested in me anymore. I'll just do those,
yeah, once they're at uni and they're like, "Oh, Mum, where are you now? What Pacific Coast Trail?" Okay, whatever. No, they'll probably want to join you, won't they? It'll be amazing.
I hope if we've not put them off.
Yeah. Okay, well, have you got time for some quick fire questions? It's just a few little fun questions just to wake you up at the end of the interview, just before we go to bed probably. So flapjack or gels?
Flapjack.
Awesome.
Flapjack.
Definitely flapjack. Beer or wine?
Wine probably.
Kindle or a real book?
A real book.
A real book. Music on your run or birdsong?
Birdsong.
Classical art or modern art?
Classical art.
Very interesting. I thought you might be a modern art person. Camping or a holiday cottage?
Probably, I would say wild camping. Okay, wild camping, somewhere like under the stars, high in mountains. Yeah, that sort of camping.
Awesome. A loo with a view. Excellent choice. A seaside run or a mountain run?
Mountain run.
Mountain run. And the final one, this is a bit of a trick one, tea or tree?
Oh right, I see. As in t-shirt or tree.
Yeah, not a cup of tea.
But I do also love tea to drink.
Yeah, so yeah, t-shirt or tree is tree. Awesome. That's fantastic. I'll just read out some nice comments from everybody just before the end. Phil says, I would be useless at navigation. Hats off to anybody who can manage it. Tad, this is when we were talking about navigation earlier. Today says he got lost on a marked half marathon once. Andrew Gilbertson said, will Jasmin be doing Bob's big backyard?
So again, I mean, I never say never, because again, this might end up being just the same as the Spine and Barkley. At the moment, it doesn't really appeal to me, but it does have that element of challenge, of like the mental sort of putting yourself through this mental challenge, and it all comes down to kind of mental resilience, doesn't it? That race, like it's who caves first, who breaks first, really. And so maybe at some point I'll be like, oh, I wouldn't rule it out entirely. At the moment, it's not on my radar, but I can imagine it might happen at some point in the future.
Yeah, never say never. And a bit more of a nice one here. Ewan says, would Jasmin consider doing the Welsh Coast Path?
Do you say the Welsh Coast Path?
Yeah, the Welsh Coast Path.
Yeah, for sure. I think that sort of thing, I would definitely like to do more of that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to retire early so you can get all these things done. Andrea says the Pacific Crest Trail is my dream, and Severin says thank you both for your time, what an inspiration. So that is a great comment to end with. I just want to say thank you very much to you, Jasmin. Fabulous answers. It was really awesome to chat to you this evening, and congratulations again on being a pretty alright runner, and I hope your training for Tour de Géant goes really, really well.
Thank you very much. Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Night everybody, and bye.